So USA Today and Ipsos has some new polling out that's pretty stunning and really shows the way that moment when the president was on the split screen in the Rose Garden and we were watching as peaceful protesters in the park were having rubber bullets and smoke canisters and pepper balls shot at them, how that really became a sort of defining turning point in the way that people were thinking about these protests. So if we can put Susan Page's tweet up here with one of the top line findings, basically almost everybody supports protesting peacefully outside the White House. Oppose is only 3%. Strongly, somewhat 6%. Like, who are those people? And so, Saagar, to me, this is part of how the president really got on the wrong side of this issue, because there was an opening there for, look, I support the protesters, but we have to have order in the streets, and I want a more aggressive, I want a more aggressive police response. Exactly. But by saying those words as we're watching while peaceful protesters are having the National Guard, military police, and Secret Service and Park Police quash them in real time, just, really damaged how people were viewing his response.
It undermined the fundamental message of it, which was that law and order should be equally and applicable to both protesters and to everybody else. And
That's
so I think that is what. I criticized it here. I thought it was terrible. But I do think that broadly what this has shown is that the strength of the protest movement was always in its nonviolence. And it's very telling to me that there is a reaction against the president and that there was a reaction against the violence at the time, given some of the polling that we saw. And in terms of the strength of the peace movement, the culmination of it on the Saturday of what happened there, we have a lot of interesting polling in order to show that. And one of the things that you really see is about the trust issue, about who do you trust in order to promote justice and equal. Let's put that up on the screen here. So in the trust issue, you can still see, amongst Republicans, law enforcement and the military, both in the high set, like 90% and 80%.
Right.
And amongst Democrats, it's 84% to Black Lives Matter, who they actually trust more than Joe Biden at 78%. But even worse, I think, for Trump is I thought it was hilarious, is the number of who is best suited to handle the current challenges. Let's throw that up there. Trump is at 43%. Now, obviously, look, stands,
this is among Republicans, by the way.
But you can see that amongst Republicans, he's undermined some of his own case here. And I actually completely understand this, which is that there was a lot of dithering that we saw in the initial days. It's like, where's Trump? Are we George Floyd, riots, looting? What is happening? Then it kind of culminates in this Rose Garden thing with the split screen. And then even then, it's not like troops went out or whatever. It was like there's a very muddled messaging with a lot of tweeting and not a lot of decisive action. There was no calls with the governors. There was no I have a task force. I'm here in the White House. So here I am sitting with people. We're figuring this thing out right now. This was also the problem with coronavirus. The press briefings ended up becoming something totally what they weren't supposed to be. And overall, it just shows the dysfunction in the White House itself and how that in a time of national crisis, all people want is normality. All they want is somebody to come out and be like, I'm horrified by what happened to George Floyd. Like I said, the Texas governor, others that I've seen who have just been, I am horrified by what happened with George Floyd. I stand with law enforcement and order in the streets, and we're going to find a way in order to live together. That's why Joe Biden is up by 10 points. Right. And I just think that really shot himself in the foot over the last 3 months. I covered today in my radar much of the polling on the economy, on just generally. I think he was set to win, and that all of this has just pushed back dramatically. Right.
And what that USA Today poll really underscores, which I think is true, is at that moment, it was very unsettled which direction things were. People did not know how to think about how to feel about opinion was deeply divided across the country. And that visual, in order to do the bizarre photo op, and the fact that the protesters were, they were just chanting, it really undermined that side of the narrative and sort of crystallized opinion in a way that was ultimately, very pro-protester and very, very much damaging to Donald Trump. And we can see we have another poll here about who do you trust to promote justice and equal treatment for people of all races. This is among all people. And actually, this is pretty stunning. This is a big turnaround. Black Lives Matter movement has the highest level of trust among the American people to promote justice and equal treatment. Joe Biden is second. Donald Trump is third. that is a stunning change. Black Lives Matter was a deeply controversial movement up until very recently. And because of the way that the confluence of how this all came together, the fact that the protests are overwhelmingly peaceful now, that you have, basically the entire public on their side, it has, in a very short period of time, and we covered this with some New York Times polling as well, dramatically changed public opinion in terms of the Black Lives Matter movement.
Yeah, I haven't seen a polling shift like this in a long time. I do think that it is fleeting. I don't think that this will last. I don't think that I'm not saying the attitudes won't last. In terms of the impact on the general election, one of the things that they talk about in that New York Times piece, which is about how in times of immense crisis, like people's attitudes will spike dramatically and will level off usually. However, I do think things have changed overwhelmingly in American politics, and that really does show you also the tension and the perils, where I think for people who want to see and enact change, we've talked a lot here about the defund the police and all of that, whereas you see, Black Lives Matter, many of them, even right here on the street where the mural is, people wrote Black Lives Matter equals defund the police. And so you see the fundamental tension of a movement which does have this upper middle class, white support and all of that, but also is, I'm basically, I would say, politically shooting itself in the foot by going and trying to align with that. And then you see Jim Clyburn and others, Joe Biden, trying to wrest that away to a more majoritarian position. So I don't know how it all shakes out. If I had to guess, it will be an overreach by activist left, a neoliberal approach by the center, and then a hard line from the Republicans, and probably nothing will change.
Well, and my view is I actually think that there is a benefit in taking the provocative and I believe right position that what we should be focusing on is decreasing the budget of policing, that is forced a vital conversation that will push neoliberals to do more than they would otherwise do. The other piece is if Republicans actually offer something, that will also push them. So I see it as an activist demand as incredibly important for moving the Overton window. We have a disagreement on the politics of that. But one thing that you are absolutely right about, which I personally kind of love, is that, all of these kind of white moderate liberals signed on for Black Lives Matter and back Black Lives without really knowing what that means. And I actually think that's a good thing, because once people say the words Black Lives Matter and they commit themselves and they go out and march and they take the selfie in front of the mural on the street and they're in, and then you fill in the blanks for them what that means, you can pull people to a position and cause them to rethink where they were previously in a way that you couldn't have if you hadn't gotten that commitment in advance, just the way that sort of human nature and psychology works.
Maybe. I think it's their movement now. I think it's gone the way of the Women's March. I think if it's gone the way of third wave feminism, and this is now third wave race consciousness. And with the Disneyfication, I think that's how you put it, which I thought was perfect. The corporatization, the Jeff Bezosization, the wokeification. I think it's there.
At the national level, that is certainly the case. Just look at Joe Biden saying, no, we don't want to defund the police. We want to fund the police. Let's give them more money. The local level, I think you're going to see a different story play out. And we already see that unfolding in Minneapolis. So
we'll see.
To be continued. More Rising for you after this.